Welcome to Golden Vital Voices. I'm Barbara Perret, and today I have a special guest, Jane Coffey, here in Salem, Connecticut. The reason I wanted to meet with Jane is because Jane has a great inspirational story to tell. She attended Woodstock in 1969 and always has great stories to tell. So, Jane, can you tell us about the moment that you had learned that you were going to be going to Woodstock?
Well, it was a progression. My girlfriend, Joyce, who lives up the street, we were in high school together. I was 14, soon to be 15, but at the time I was still 14. And we got the New York Times and saw the ad, this long list of amazing musicians, every musician you ever wanted to see back then, and read about this happening in Woodstock, New York. And we, of course, were too young to go on our own and knew our parents would not let us. So we both happen to have sisters that are exactly 5 years older than us. And so we made a proposition to them, like, look, all these people playing, this is going to be an amazing thing. Don't you guys want to go? And of course they did, because it was an amazing lineup. So we worked slowly, bringing the idea around to our parents. And as we did that, we got more and more people decided to go with us. So in the end, there was probably 12 of us, I guess. And my sister's Volkswagen bus and two other cars. And we had, as young kids, lived up in that area. So I think that helped my parents.
They felt comfortable.
They felt comfortable because we were going someplace they knew. And so, and of course they knew, nobody expected what actually happened. So they had no idea.
They thought it was a little music concert in the green somewhere.
Yeah. In the hills and yeah. And so.
You were living in New York at the time, right?
No, we were living here in.
Oh, you were in Connecticut.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And so we planned and we raised some money. Joyce's mother owned a package store. And so we made a deal with her that we would paint her package store if she'd loan us the money to buy the tickets.
And how would you buy the tickets?
We had to drive to Hartford to get them.
Okay.
And so then off we went. And we, being country girls, we made loaves of zucchini bread and we packed. We had so much food with us, which of course was a godsend when we got there. We had tickets for all 3 nights.
Okay.
And of course the tickets were useless when we got there.
No one was collecting them.
No. And it happened sort of just the time we got there, because we left probably about 10 o'clock the previous night. 10 o'clock Thursday night.
Okay. Because it starts on the Friday.
It started on the Friday. So we got there at dawn, and there were still an amazing number of people. The New York State Thruway, it wasn't closed yet.
Okay.
But it was solid. We were just creeping along. So yeah, we knew something was up. That this was going to be a whole different experience. So we found a campsite in the field off the main road, and so we parked the vehicles, and then we walked up to the site, the stage, and that's when they were just starting to storm the fences.
Okay. All right. So you got to witness that. Here we are with our tickets, but that didn't really matter. Yeah. And people were making their way in, and then instead of waiting in big, massive lines, people just ripped down the fences to get in.
That had already happened, but had just happened. And so we made our way. We wound our way down through the crowd. Another friend, Danny, was with us, who was and my neighbor Richard, and they were both musicians. And so they were hell-bent on getting as close as possible. So we're weaving our way through, down, and we walked to the very front, and there was a ambulance run right in front of the stage. So they'd left it open, and it was like trap rock, right? So we sat on the very edge of that, and I believe somebody came along and said, no, you got to move. And we just scooted back just a bit, maybe 6 inches. And he said, okay, well, don't let anybody sit in front of you.
Geez.
And so we were right in front.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. And people, of course, did fill in, but it was only about, I don't know, 15 feet to the stage.
Wow.
So we had such amazing seats that we didn't leave. We sat there for 3 days.
Wow. So you got basically the front row.
Yep.
And then said, we can't leave here.
Right. No, we would have never gotten back. The crowd was so packed.
Now, was your food still all back somewhere else?
This is the interesting thing. None of us can remember about like
how you ate.
How we ate. I do remember that, we sat there through the rain, we kind of nodded off at night after the music stopped, but sometimes the music didn't stop till like 4 in the morning or something. So
as you were sitting there, when the music began, was that Friday?
Friday, yeah.
Was it early in Friday?
Yeah. I think Richie Havens started about, I think it was like at 3 or something.
He was the first?
Yeah.
To go on?
He was, yeah. I think he was the only one that was there that got, I mean, there were.
That's true. The musicians had to get there.
Yeah, yeah. And so anyway. But it was amazing. I mean, it was an amazing experience. And,
it stuck with you your whole life.
It did. It did. And I have to say, with what was going on in the world at the time, there was a lot, it was during the Vietnam War. And, kids I went to high school with were getting drafted. Like, I just remember the agony of those boys, waiting for that letter and their number. There was a draft. And so they were getting sent a number. And depending on what that number was, they were going to go. It's just a horrible thing to have hang over you at such a young age. So there was that, and then, there's just a lot of strife. There's racial tensions and protests, and it wasn't a great time. And there was such a huge divide in the generation between us and our parents. I don't think it's ever been that divisive. Right. Solely between generations. And the thing about Woodstock was, because in my experience, I mean, I loved my parents, they loved us, but there was a lot of conflict because they didn't understand why we were protesting the war. And in particular, my parents, they were both in World War II. Right. So, I mean, they later came to understand at some point, that it was a very, very different war. But for them at the time, I'm sure it felt like we were rejecting them in their service. And when we weren't, Yeah. It was definitely a different situation. It was a totally different war, Yeah. And, it didn't take away from what they did. What they did was very important, Yeah. And, it was a time when you didn't stand up to your parents. Yeah. And, women's rights were like, when I got out of high school in my first year of college, there were still places I couldn't go. There were a lot of bars I couldn't go into. They're men only. There were clubs you couldn't go to unless you were escorted by a man or a boy. And so that also, I think that people don't realize that now, that there were a lot of things women couldn't do. You couldn't get a mortgage without a man's signature. Yeah. And if you were a single woman, you weren't going to get it. No. Yeah. Right. And you weren't getting promoted in your jobs, and there were low-level jobs, and it was really a struggle to, make your way up any further. So, yeah. So there was a lot going on. So from what I've heard, when people were arriving at Woodstock, people would say, wow, there's so many more people out here just like me, that feel the same way. And the connection was huge because really it was except for the people right in your town that you may have gone to school with, there was no social media. That's how you all came together, which made it even more powerful. Yeah. Yes. Of a gathering. Yes. And yes, I think that was, all of a sudden you were in a sea of people, and I mean, huge, 500,000 people. Yeah. That you knew kind of you knew they shared your values, or that they were your people, Yeah. And the interesting thing about that time which I don't think's happened since, was there was such a division socially of the young people who were sort of in that mindset, and the older generation, and even younger people too, that like when you saw somebody on the street, with long hair and jeans, you say, okay, I know who that is.
Okay.
So people would say, I can't believe you used to hitchhike. And as well, back then, you knew who to trust. Like right. It was immediate. There was all these identifiers. Like there's the us and them.
Right.
Right. You knew who you were safe with.
Wow.
Which is I mean, I know that sounds idealistic, but it is the case. It was like, I would never hitchhike now.
Right.
But back then, I would. And I would turn down rides. Like if they weren't the person I thought they were, I would not get in the car.
Right.
But there was this like kind of, I guess it was like shorthand, like, okay, long hair, jeans, bell bottoms. Okay. We're on the same page.
Right.
And that, and then the other thing that was a unifying force of that time was the music. There was no time in my adolescence music was not the center of my life.
Right.
And that was the same with my friends. Like that's what you talked about. That's what you did. That's how you socialized. It was just all about the music.
Right. You would talk about the music and what you enjoyed, and then you would share in it.
And there was so much music. There was so much music, and it wasn't like there was just one genre, right?
Yeah.
You would listen to folk music, you would listen to jazz, you would listen to pop music, you'd listen to rock. It was also what bonded us together. And like I said, that's what we did. We go, like, I don't remember we go hiking and stuff like that. But other than that, what I remember is we went to this concert, we went to that concert, we went to this bar to hear that band. And even, just local bands. There was a lot of support, and there was a lot of local bands. And particularly in Connecticut, the blues was huge.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of blues bands and a lot of bars that they played in. And at the time, there were even bars that you could get into if you were under 16.
Okay.
That didn't have alcohol, right?
So it was about the music.
So it was about the music, yeah.
Wow.
And they'd be packed. And people danced. It's like you didn't just, you participated.
Right. Absolutely. And as we know, music is very healing and it's therapeutic. So is music still a part of your life?
I listen to music a lot. And I when the switch from LPs to CDs, somewhere along the line in one of my moves, I lost a lot of my LPs, but so I have a CD collection, and now it's hard getting a CD player. But yes, I do. I listen to a lot of music, and I listen to the music I listened to back then. But I also I love Brazilian music, African music. I like music from different parts of the world, and so I'm always interested in hearing, new stuff that I wouldn't necessarily come across by myself. There's a site on the internet, and it's called Radio Zero. You can go on, and it's got a map of the world.
Okay.
And you can put the arrow on a country or city and click on it, and then you can slide a timeline to what year.
Interesting.
And it plays the music from that place at that time. So
is that an app for your phone?
No, it's just on the internet. It's fascinating because not only can you listen to music from other countries, but from other times in other countries. So let's say you want to hear something from 1950 from Nigeria, you can do that. And then, or if you want to listen to something from 2024 in Mali or, Argentina, or, it's really fun.
I know that there's been that upsurge, of course, where people have the vinyl back again, and they're interested in reinvesting in the vinyl. And Discogs is a very popular website where there's thousands and thousands of original vinyl records hosted in their private collections. And you can either go and search their private collections to learn more about the music, or you can actually purchase. Yep.
Oh, wow, that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. So Discogs is definitely great for those people who are interested in learning more about music and the history of music and the vinyl that is out there.
Yeah.
So those collections that have been in storage and hidden are back, and that's a huge way to find it.
Also, I just found on streaming. I guess they're produced by the BBC, but they're called classic albums. But they're documentaries on an album, like the making of the album, and with if the musicians are still alive, interviews, and how the album was made, and who was involved, and they're so interesting. I watched one the other night, and it was on the band Cream, and so Eric Clapton, Ginger Baker, and what's his name? Yeah, blanking on the third one, but and it was amazing. It was amazing, and Eric Clapton was explaining how he came to, you know, um, his involvement in the blues, because he was a huge blues guitarist, right? Britain, but his label was Atlantic Records, and
Right.
but it was really, really interesting. I had to laugh because one of my classic stories is that, so back when, I think this was probably before we went to Woodstock, we had a small general store up the street, and there is nothing in this town except for that general store and the firehouses and the gas station. But that general store had everything. It had anything you could possibly want, but maybe just one of them. But if you needed something, and it was uh, and this woman named Edith Congdon ran it, and she'd sit there all day, but she knew everything that was in the store. And you go in, Edith, do you have some needles and thread? So I walk in there one day, and in the front of the store was a record rack, which I'd never seen there before. And there was mostly, Christmas albums, or country western, or Frank Sinatra, that era of music. There was this one album that was like, it was day glow colored, and I went over. I go, what is that? Right? It was a Cream. It was Disraeli Gears, the Cream album. And I'm like, what is that? What is that doing here? So I bought it. It was my first album I ever bought.
Really?
And so I brought it home, and I called my next door neighbor, who was a guitarist. I said, "You're not going to believe what I found at Congdon's." And he said, "What?" And he got on his bicycle and rode up there. Of course, it was the only one. But yeah, to this day, it was like, what was that doing? It was such an outlier of all the other music there. But anyway, so this PBS series is, they just choose an album, and it's really good. It's
a PBS series.
Yep. And but it is, I think I found it on YouTube.
Okay.
And it'll just tell you what the album is. And
right.
Yeah, it was really interesting.
So as you were at Woodstock throughout your life, did things always bring you back to those moments? Was it an inspiration in other ways in your life?
I think the biggest change in my life was it stored my faith in humanity. Okay. Like, it was a tough time.
It was very political.
And also, it was still the Cold War, so there was that, I was the generation of the duck and cover. They trained us in grammar school to hide under your desks in case nuclear bomb fell on us, So, I mean, the kids now have much worse, much more traumatic things in their lives than we had then. But people were so kind, and everybody took care of everybody else. And it was, really tough conditions. I mean, it rained. We were sitting in mud. The food was running out. It was physically, I mean, it's a good thing I was so young.
Yes,
those things, you just roll off you, right?
Yeah, very resilient.
Sleeping on the ground, yeah, no problem. But because you were in this greatest place on earth at the moment, where you're like, I'm not leaving here. I don't care how muddy it is. I mean, I didn't want to be anywhere else, at that point. But the fact that there were that many people in that tough conditions, and everybody was so kind and helpful. I had somebody. I think it was the last day, and there was there really was no food. I had many actually amazing things happen, but we were walking down. We were headed back to the camp, and this the camp meaning where we were camped out. The cars were okay. Yeah, and because it was quite a long walk from where the stage was, and this young man, he stopped and he gave me half his hamburger. Right? Just I know, I guess I looked hungry. I don't know, but at that point, the like he probably had the last hamburger. There wasn't a lot of food left. And then I had injured my foot, and I had spent Sunday night in the hospital tent, and so they had hospital tents. Yes, and a lot of volunteers, and I'm sure that wasn't the original plan. No, they did. They were going to have a hospital. Yes, okay, yeah, with that many people, because they did know it was going to be a big concert. Okay, I mean, big enough anyway that you do need aid on site. They had run out of anesthesia, and so I had cut my foot, kind of a wedge out of the side of my foot, and so they told me they were going to fly me out to the hospital. I don't know. That's dramatic. Yeah, I'm not going out. I'm not. Well, how was I going to find my sister and friend? Anyway, I didn't want to go, and so they stitched me up without any anesthesia, which was a little painful. But the next day, I had a plastic bag on my foot, and we're headed back, and people would pick me up and put me, like these guys would put me on their back and carry me. They'd see me limping, and and then they were just handing me off. Yeah, it was just very. That's amazing. Yeah, it sort of was a reaffirmation of that. People basically are kind and good. And even when in that sort of not critical, but just like it wasn't an easy place to be. And I mean, I think that helped me as I went out in the world. I think I was more after that, more trusting of people. Okay. Or more willing to look for the goodness in people. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And so afterwards it was like, of course still went to concerts and, and local bands and stuff like that, I mean, I think it sort of solidified that music was sort of the center of my life. Yes. When I was that age. Enter their life. Or let me rephrase that. So is there anything that you would suggest to people who may be feeling a little gloomy or trying to live healthier lives? How to go about bringing music into their life if it's not part of their daily life? I would. I mean, I feel strongly that music could elevate your state of mind. And I know that there's been a lot of studies where with people with dementia or aphasia, if they hear music, particularly music that they associate with their past or that they're familiar with, and I've seen it. I went to see a very dear friend of mine, and she was in her 80s and just starting to have some cognitive problems, and she loved music. She loved jazz, and so she had gone into a nursing home, and she was, I could tell the depression was setting in. She was slowly kind of withdrawing. And so I made her a tape of all the musicians I knew that she liked. And I brought it to her and we were playing it and she just lit up. Yeah. And then she started talking. She was just more engaged. And she's, I remember this song. You can, of course, do all of that on your own. Just find avenues and ways to get music to you, or just, share with one other person, whether you're talking on the phone and both listening to music that's familiar to both of you or sharing new styles of music. It's the joy that you feel that's what I'm hearing. After I retired, Right. And so, I lived a very busy life. I lived in New York for many, many years. And then I retired back out here to Connecticut. And I write. So I spend a lot of time alone. Okay. By choice. Yes. But because to write, you have to do that. And you still write. I still do. Yes. And so, but I find like I get up in the morning and I put music on and it just energizes me a little. Yeah. And depending on my mood, though, whatever mood I'm in, or if I want to change my mood, I'll put something like I love Brazilian music, and it's just so lovely, or if I want something more raucous, it'd be Bonnie Raitt or something really like to get you going, to get me going. Or sometimes I just like to listen to classical music. Yeah. It's just calm and it's very soothing. But depending on what type of classical music you listen to. But really, I can't listen to music when I write. Okay. Unless that makes sense. Unless there's no words to it. So okay. Or it's in another language. Oh. But if it's in English, I can't listen. Because you're going to listen to the word. Yeah, it interferes with my. So I do listen to a lot of either classical or Brazilian or Latin music. I do find that if I'm listening to my the old the music from the 60s and 70s, right? Like there are things I remember about that time, and you kind of drift off into thought. Well, I know that you're a writer and that you were still writing, and is there certain topics of writing that you enjoy more than others? Well, I started out as a nonfiction writer because I'd gone back to school very late in life. Mm-hmm. Like I went back to school to get my master's when I was 45. And up until that point, I'd been a photographer. And when I was a photographer, I used to volunteer to go on trips with naturalists. They were studying birds, or they were studying dolphins or whatever. And I'd volunteer. I'll go and take pictures for you. Okay. If I can tag along, right? And I loved doing that. I loved it so much. But it made me realize how little science background I had in biology, and okay. How much I didn't know about nature. So I decided to go back to school and take natural science classes, and I was at Wesleyan, and they have a great writing program. So one of my professors suggested I take some writing classes, and so I ended up writing on mostly natural science subjects. And that's when your writing started? Yeah. Wow. Yeah, so I didn't start writing until I was in my late 40s. And so I went with one of my professors to a research project in Argentina. They were both volcanologists. And so they couldn't get an undergraduate student to go with them. I said, I'll go, I said, I'll go, I'll take pictures for you. And so they said, okay. So we were planning the trip, and they had, one of them had said to me, there's this amazing tree in this area of the Andes that maybe you should write your thesis about. So I said, okay, yeah, sounds great. Not quite as tall as the redwoods, but it's that size of a tree, right. Huge. So 2 weeks before we were supposed to go, one of them he couldn't go. Okay. And so, and then 3 days before we were to leave, the other one said, well, something's come up, I can't go. And I went myself. Of course, by yourself. You went to Woodstock at 14. Well, this is not right. So anyway, he met me at the airport with all these suitcases full of water sampling material and meters and so now you're a scientist. And he's teaching me how to, on the floor of the airport, teaching me how to use all this stuff. That's incredible. And I have my stuff, my cameras and stuff I'm carrying, and now I got these. And it was way out in the middle of nowhere in the Andes, and so I had to fly to Buenos Aires, and then fly to the foot of the Andes, and then take a 6-hour bus ride up into the Andes. With all of this? With all this equipment. And they said, when you get to this town, Neuquén, at the foot of the Andes, go see this geologist, and he'll give you some other stuff and a gas mask and all this stuff, because the thing they were studying was a crater lake in the volcano.
Okay.
So I had to end up climbing that volcano and get water out of the crater lake.
Wow. And take pictures.
And take pictures and take water samples. And so it was
that's an amazing journey.
That was a story. So when I got home, I wrote my thesis, and I wrote the story of, like, it was the tale of going, the natural history of the tree.
Oh, yeah.
And then I sort of interwove these essays about, the art of observation, and about how, like, artists and naturalists use the same tools to do their work, And so I wrote this book, and I did get it published. So.
And what's the book called?
It's called 3 Degrees of Latitude.
Okay. And it's got your name on it.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And you can get it on Amazon,
and your last name is spelled Coffey.
Yep.
Okay.
And it's a thin book and a lot of photographs.
Well.
Yes. But so that kind of started my writing, career, and so then since then I've written a novel that takes place in Brazil.
And what's that called?
That is called Refuge, but it's not published yet. So
okay,
sending it out.
All right.
And now I'm working. So that's done, but I haven't gotten it out in the world yet. And now I'm working on a murder mystery.
Excellent. I love mysteries.
I know. I read them all the time. It's how I relax.
So I'm definitely gonna look out for that.
And I'm having more fun with. I mean, it is fun. It's fun. Plotting it.
So next time that you and I get together, you can give us some more information about your writing and what inspires you to write. We'll have your books here. Yeah.
Let's hope.
Yeah, and definitely the books that you already have, but then some of your new, and we can talk about your writing, and
okay,
that would be wonderful. I would really appreciate that.
All right. Well, thank you.
You're welcome. We appreciate Jane Coffey being here with us and talking about Woodstock and her experience and how that inspired her through her life, and how music is a big part of her life, and how it can be a beneficial addition to anybody's life. And then for the future, we'll definitely talk more about her writing.
Well, thank you. Thank you for.
Yeah. No, thank you. And thanks for the tea.
My pleasure.
Great ginger tea. And a beautiful home next to this lake in Connecticut. So we'll see everybody real soon on Golden Vital Voices, and I appreciate you being here.
Take care.